Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 52 of Unmasked. I'm your host, Neil Getzlow. As always, thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. If you are a faithful listener and now a faithful viewer, I thank you for following me over here on YouTube, as this is actually video episode number 1 of the podcast. I've been doing this now for a year and have a lot of great interviews over the past year, just in audio format. So if you're a faithful listener, if you're a new viewer, new listener, hey, I just encourage you to go check out Unmasked on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Scroll through the old shows and check out some of the interviews we did over the past year. And then also, if you're new to this channel, check out neilgetzlow.com. You can learn about my journey, and we're going to be getting into that as this new YouTube channel. Well, it's been out here for a while, but we're finally going to put some content on there, and it starts with episode 52 of Unmasked. So just thank you again for tuning in this week. So this past week was Valentine's Day, and I got to be honest, it's not my favorite holiday of the year. I think it's a made-up holiday by some marketing executives who said, hey, I think we can find a way to get people to buy lots of cards and candy and flowers and stuffed animals and all that good stuff, right? Just because it's the one day of the year that we're going to get them to celebrate their spouses or significant others. And I just think that we ought to be loving our spouses and our significant others every single day of the year, not just on one day of the year. And so it got me thinking about this passage in a book that I just was reading, and it's Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas. If you aren't familiar with this book, I encourage you to check it out. A really good book. And there's a passage in here that I want to read to you. Once I became a father, this made perfect sense to me. It came the day I realized that Lisa isn't just my wife, she's also God's daughter, and I was to treat her accordingly. When I realized I am married to God's daughter and that you women are married to God's son, everything about how I viewed marriage changed. God feels about my wife, his daughter, in an even holier and more passionate way than I feel about my own children. And when I read that passage, it just stopped me in my tracks. I've been on this journey now of being saved and turning around my marriage over the past 3 years. And how I look at my wife, Amy, how I treat her is so amazingly different than what it was just 3 years ago. But, I never actually sat down and said, you know what, I am married to God's daughter. And, now that I have that context in my mind, now I can't stop thinking about it. And it makes me want to, even love Amy even more and give her more respect that she deserves as God's daughter. And, I just asked that question for all of us. Are we treating our spouses with the love and respect that God's daughters and sons deserve? So tonight's guest can speak to that. We're talking with Curt and Brook Vignery. Curt is at the Rock of KC, and he was very instrumental in helping me come to the Lord. You can actually read about his how he helped me in my book, Unmasked, Conquering Sexual Sin and Walking in Victory, which you can find at neilgetzlow.com. Thank you so much. But together with Brook, they lead the church marriage ministry, and we talk about some practical ways for couples to keep that love burning 365 days a year. And it really starts with having God at the center of your relationship. So let's just jump right into it. Let's unmask godly marriages with Curt and Brook Vignery. Hey, Brook and Curt, thank you so much for coming on the Unmasked podcast. And I think this might be the first video podcast I've ever done as well. So we'll see how this turns out. But I appreciate your time.
Right on.
Fingers crossed. And so, hey, before we jump into the heart of the topic tonight, I just want to give you a chance just to take a second just to introduce yourselves and tell everybody a little bit about you.
Sure. I'm Curt Vignery. This is my wife, Brook Vignery, and we are pastors, gym owners, marriage coaches.
All of the above.
All of the above. And we've been married for 22 years. Yep.
And almost all of them happy.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have to dig into that.
Yeah, right.
We have 2 boys. They're 17 and 18.
Yeah, one college and one junior in high school, and 3 dogs.
3 dogs.
Oh yeah, the new kids of the family.
Yeah, the doodles, the 2 doodles.
Well, and and before, we get too far down the path, I do want to say thanks to both of you. I appreciate all that you've done for Amy and me in our journey. You've been this huge source of encouragement, and Curt, you were, helped me way back in the beginning, before I even was saved, and before I knew what was about to hit me. You were back there whispering, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So 22 years of marriage. So, well, how did you guys meet?
Well, let's see. We were in high school, but we went to different high schools. So we had a mutual friend, and he would bring Curt around.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty God story, but to summarize it, I had high sprained my ankle my senior year and couldn't play football. So instead of playing football, I really was struggling to go watch the games. So my buddy said, well, why don't we go to the school where he was from and flirt with the cheerleaders at the soccer games. And so that's what I did. I went to the game and found her. So a blessing out of something that I did at the time. Was very disappointed that I couldn't play my senior year. But now that through this lens, I'm like, wow, had I not hurt myself, I would have never went to the soccer games and maybe never. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Sure. And so, I really want to focus in and talk to the both of you about, because you do a lot of work with marriages and couples and trying, and especially focused on helping build relationships, heal relationships, and put God at the center of all that too. But speaking from your experience over 22 years, I'm sure there were some moments of uneasiness along the way, just like every marriage.
Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah. I mean, when we got married, we were really young. I was barely 19 and he was 21.
Yeah. And
so we knew the odds were not in our favor, and everyone was kind of thinking it wasn't going to work out. And so we went into marriage, and it was pretty easy at the beginning. Like, everybody said, oh, the first year is going to be the hardest. And we breezed right through that. So, we thought we were like rock stars at being married. Like, we were so good at it.
Right.
And then we got to about the 7-year mark, and life just kind of punched us in the face, and the bottom kind of fell out. And we, had to rebuild for like 3 years. We had to rebuild from that. And so, but then on the other side of that, it's been even better than when we thought we were really great at being married.
Right.
So it has had its ups and downs for sure. But I think if you can get through those things, then you're definitely stronger on the other side. So
it's worth. I think we determined that the best marriage, like we wanted to have the best marriage. We were tired of settling. Mm-hmm. Now that's finally when we got to a place of like clarity like that. And that took me opening my eyes to see how wrong I was, how I needed to change my perspective and change behavior, change perspective, ask for forgiveness, all these things, and totally do a 180, which required her, offering, like, she didn't have to, she had plenty of reasons to not. And, but she chose to dig in, and we chose to fight for the healthiest marriage. So,
yeah. So we just decided that, like, we had to draw a line in the sand and move forward, and we were only going to have a 10 out of 10 marriage. Nothing else was like, why bother? Right. So if you're not going to have the amazing marriage, then we're not settling for less than amazing. So we had to just put the work in and dig into each other and dig into the Lord and make some changes.
And I can totally relate to that, of course, right? Because we sort of had a before and after marriage, right? And before was pretty horrible. But that was all on me. But the after has been more than you could ever imagine. And
Yeah.
so I'm curious for you guys in your marriage, what were some of the things that you had to sort of make a U-turn on to get to that point where now, instead of, you know, hitting the ones and twos in your marriage, now you're constantly hitting those tens?
Number one was really like me asking the forgiveness piece. That was like step one. And not just like the typical like forgive me and we can brush this under the carpet and move forward. It was come to her, forgive me, and I have no demands. I think that's like a real critical thing when somebody misses it in marriage. And for me, I was missing the mark big time. Saying yes to relationships, saying yes to work, saying yes to good things, even that were taken away from family, taken away from intimacy. Really bad, poor decisions. So I had to lay at her feet and lay it down and just say, will you forgive me? And I make no demands on how that looked. And then number two, God opened my eyes, looking at her one night as I came home from another late night, I remember saying yes to a ministry thing and saying yes to some people and staying out way too late, and coming home and just staring, and my spirit broke to, I don't know my wife. How have we arrived in the space of cohabitating? How have we arrived? And it really hit me. It's me. I can't speak for her and her part, but I knew it's me, and God pulled it back. And so then my heart's desire was to know her, to know from the smallest things, to get to know her, because we were married so young. We got married at 21 and 19, and pre-25, there's a lot of stuff that's just not developed. And so we lived on love. Like we existed for the first 7 years on, I love you, and we can nothing can take us down, or, you know, we can stand against anything. Well, sure, when things are good, but what about when it gets tested? What about when you have a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and then relationships, people in your ear saying, you're so wonderful, your wife should tell you these things, you know, and your wife's pregnant, or we had 2 kids and my wife's taking care, you know what I mean? Like she's doing a lot, and it's like, she's not there to exalt me. And I didn't get that. I didn't understand that. So I can say for me, those were the things of this, having these things pulled back to see like clearly of, wow, woe is me. You know, like how did I allow this? So there's a lot of like
Humility.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. A lot of humility.
Yeah.
And for you, Brooke, then, you know, obviously, yes, forgiveness, right? That is the key that unlocks the path forward in these type of, you know, in marriages all the time. But for you, how hard was it easy for forgiveness? Was it something that you sort of had to go to God to and say, help me?
I think it was definitely like a process. Obviously, like there were still things that would come up a year, 2 years down the road that I had to deal with. I think us having open and honest communication. So when I had an issue, I would bring it up to him, and he would validate my feelings and listen to me, and wouldn't be like, oh, we're not going to talk about that. That's in the past. You're just being sensitive. You're just being crazy. He didn't dismiss my feelings because he knew that it was a process for me to work through. So that was huge. The second thing was, I think, seeing him so humble and broken, and knowing that struggle inside him gave me more compassion for him. I could see the brokenness and feel that, and the things that he was wrestling with God with. And so it made me have more compassion for him and see him in a different light than just seeing him as like, oh, he's just being a big jerk, you know. Like I was looking through God's eyes, and that's what I would pray. I would say, let me see him how you see him, not through my pain, my disappointment, you know, what I think he should do and what I think he should be, but like, help me to be his biggest cheerleader. Because like, I could tell that he was punishing himself enough. He didn't need me to come along and just add to it. He needed me to come along and be his biggest cheerleader and help him and support him and work through it with him, not just lay on more heaps of shame and pain. And, so that was my prayer and my posture during that time. And honestly, sometimes I don't know how I got to that posture, but I dug into the Lord a lot. So
Yeah. And so how, this is going to sound like a crazy question, but like, how important is God in marriages? Now, right, we know it's important, but I think sometimes you sort of on your own spiritual walk at times, and sometimes that walk is, I'm not going to say in opposite directions, but you're kind of off doing your own thing. And I think, for Amy and me, that's been the key, is being able to be like walking together in the same, in the same footsteps with God. Like, and just from your perspective, how important is that?
Well,
I mean,
she can tell you her prayer, which is something we share with couples.
yeah, and I would pray even when we were dating, and I was a little church girl that went to all the church stuff and private Christian school and all the things, and so I just would pray and pray that Curt and I would get closer together as we got closer to God. And so like I wanted us to go like this, so that we would get closer together as we got closer to the Lord. And I think that when you can have good relationships, but I think the deepest relationships are when your souls are connected, right? So I think if you're not moving in that spiritual direction together and sharing those things, it's just a level that you'll miss out on, that I think is just a crucial level in your intimacy, and like sharing what God speaks to you and where you're going and what you think, and like having someone that you can talk to about that. So
yeah, it's always like it's crazy to think that while we were in ministry, because we've been in ministry since we got married, pretty much. Like we jumped in we
got married in August. We moved and became youth pastors in October of that same year.
So it's kind of crazy to think that we like knew some of these things, but then you can still not walk in them. Like you can have your relationship with God and she has her relationship with God, but together you're not really growing together. And I mean, it's a whole nother topic. I mean, to understand it, the deception that can happen, spiritual deception, and these exchanges that we could say, well, I'm doing these good things. And so you begin to, or I began to, and people can dismiss the bad because, well, I'm doing this. So in the marriage, it's so pivotal to be walking like literally together, like we're individuals, but we're walking on the same journey, on the same path. So when we face struggles, we're both realigning them to the truth of the Word of God in the same context, because we're both growing in the Lord. And so, if that makes sense. And then, then I think when I'm high, we don't get high, Neil.
This is Missouri. It's all legal now.
but when I'm on the mountaintop experience and she's a little low, then I'm able to speak truth in her, not in condemning, not in shaming, but able, because we're on the same journey. But I understand we have highs and lows, we have mountaintops, we have peaks and valleys. So vice versa. She's there for me and I'm there for her. That's how God has put this. Like we are fighting for one another, not against. And so that's the difference. Like when you're having a cruddy day and your spouse comes in and they don't want, they're just like, they don't want to hear it. They don't mess around with it. I mean, or they can say, hey, no, it's going to be okay. Like, and this is the truth of it.
And I think you have to, like, if the Lord is the voice that you're listening to the same voice, right? So he's going to give you the same context and like, truth to move
Mm.
forward. Where I think when we were struggling in our marriage, we were listening to a lot of different voices that were saying a lot of different things. And we were getting pulled in a lot of different directions where we thought, well, I think this is the way to go. And I think this is right. And I think, yeah, I think you're wrong there. And I think you're, and we were listening to so many voices. But when you're both listening to one voice, and that's the voice that we're following, then it makes things so much easier, because you're everything else is just out here, but you're both focused on the same voice, saying the same things, moving you in the same direction, speaking the same truth. So I think that's pivotal.
Yeah, it is. And can I say one more thing on that? Because you can't listen, you can't hear a voice if you're not praying, if you're not, you're not together. Can't hear together if you're not praying together. And I think that was a deep revelation for us, that we started walking in on the other side of this. We started praying together. Yeah. Like, it's kind of wild to think that we were, following Christ, but we weren't praying together, outside, like maybe in church, but like at home and stuff, we're not praying over one another. We're not taking just a little bit of time and speaking, and praying so we can hear. So we both like hear, and we both look at each other. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take something that we don't pray every day together. We'd like to, but that doesn't happen every day. But it's intentional that we're praying together.
And it changes the dynamic, because like if you're frustrated with someone or annoyed with someone, and then you pray together and you hear them pray over you and for you, and it's really hard to be mad at someone when they're praying over you and praying for your future and your hopes and your dreams and protect them. I mean, it breaks down a lot of walls in a relationship when you're praying those things over each other too. So
for sure.
And I think that's I think that's a great point, because there were times where I would get frustrated at Amy, and then I would just I'd hang on to that anger. And, I'm speaking, obviously, Curt, here specifically for men. Like, sometimes your wife will do something and you're just like, you can't let it go. And it just creates this, friction and tension. And then, but, so I used to carry on to that. But what made the difference and what sort of helped me let it go a heck of a lot faster was when we were praying together. Yeah. And it just sort of centered you again, like, okay, like, this is, what am I doing? Why am I angry over something that is so insignificant?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, like, for men, like, I guess, we all struggle at times, inside marriages, I guess what would be the, as you're talking to couples, and, like, what are some of the first things you're telling, would be your advice to marriages that might be looking for some help? Because, in this culture today, I think there's, like, marriages aren't necessarily looked upon like as this sacred, union anymore. Like, it's so easy, it's the culture says, you don't like what you got, well, go find something else. And you don't even get divorced. Go find something first, and then, take care, get divorced later. So there's a lot of mixed signals coming from culture about marriages. But how would you counsel, couples that are coming to you struggling right now and looking for that first time sort of, what are those first steps they can do to start to rebuild?
Yeah. Well, I think let me speak to just marriage real quick, because that would be where we'd start with couples. We'd actually kind of like ask them. I know we've asked probably the majority of our couples of like, do you still want to be married? Like, if neither one of them, like, if one of them's like, nah, then okay, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna work on this? Because it takes two healthy people to work really on a marriage. Like, there's a deception that you can just work on a marriage. It's like you're really working on individuals.
Well, and most people that sit down and talk to us and they say, we want to work on our marriage, they're really going like, like,
fix them,
right?
Yeah.
So like our posture is, like he said, it takes two healthy people to have a healthy marriage. So really, you're working on you and bringing your best to the marriage. And then the other person, then you'll have a healthy marriage.
Yeah. So it's like the question becomes really like, do you want to know who you are? Like, do you want to know who you are and be known? And then the power is in the choosing. Like, because the reality is, if you go off and you go somewhere else, they're gonna get to know you, and they're gonna have to make a choice, or either choose you or say, I'm out of this one. And then what is that, just a cycle? Like, I actually think, I was telling a gentleman yesterday, I said, how amazing, we're talking about marriage, and he loves his wife, and it's pretty beautiful, it's pretty cool, and it's genuine, and he has to, but he's like, I have to reassure her, like, she'll ask me, like, are you sure? And he's like, I choose you. And I said, bro, I can't tell you, like, this side of heaven, what power there is in feeling chosen. Like, right? Like, we all know the natural feeling of being chosen, like, in school or whatever, you get chosen for something, it feels pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. And this is what happens every day in marriage. You get the power to choose, to look at one another and see them, and see the flaws, see the blemishes. And we most certainly do. She knows me better than anybody else, and she still chooses me. And I'm going, that's incredible. It's a glimpse of Jesus. Like, it's a glimpse of Jesus's love for us, and he chooses us, right? Jesus knows us actually more intimately, and he still says, I love you, and I have a hope, and I have a future. And it's like, we want that to be like, just cover marriages of, like, look at each other and like start to go like, on some level, like, you're going to have to choose somebody, and somebody's going to have to choose you if you want to be in a healthy relationship.
Well, and like,
right,
when we talk about two healthy people make a healthy marriage, you have to get to the place where you're not codependent and needy, and you have to have a relationship, and you have to be so good with yourself. Like, you and the Lord are good, right? Yeah. Like, I'm good.
Right.
And so therefore I don't need you, I don't have to Jerry Maguire, like, you complete me. No, I'm complete. You're complete.
Yeah.
I don't need you. I'm not dependent on you. I'm not needy and all of this stuff. I choose you.
Yeah.
Which that changes the whole relationship dynamic when you need somebody versus when you choose somebody.
Yeah.
Because therefore it's like, I just on purpose am choosing every day to be with you. Yeah. I don't have to, because I could be by myself and be completely fine, because I'm a whole individual, but I choose to be with you, which just makes the relationship feel just different, I think.
Yeah. It takes a level of healthiness in individuals. And I think where it starts is, like, it doesn't take perfection. Like, it doesn't take, like, oh gosh, okay, so we got to be totally healthy and then we'll have a healthy marriage. No. Nobody's totally healthy. Like, nobody is walking in perfection. So what it takes, though, is an awareness. Mm-hmm. Like, and most people have such blinders on their own, right? Like, so it's like this, right? We came to marriage counseling, fix them. And I'm like, no, we're working on you. And same with Oprah, we're working on you. Like, if you're willing to say, I'm part in this.
Because even if it's 90-10,
it's still,
you have the 10% you can work on.
Because we don't want to, like, give passage and just give this, like, to people to treat, well, I got to choose them. I got to choose somebody, so I'll choose them and I'll just work through this junk. It's like, no, hold on. That's not what we're saying either. We're wanting, like, people with, like, really strong self-awareness to know that, hey, I want to grow. I
think back to when we were in our low point, and when we talked about, like, humility, it was the same thing. It was like self-awareness. Because there had been a lot of years where I'd try to point out things, and it was like, oh, no, that's not, no, you're wrong. That's not happening. You're crazy, whatever. But then when it flipped and there was a self-awareness, which brings humility, which just leads you down a whole different path of your relationship. When you can say, I do miss the mark and I'm sorry, and I want to do better. Like, it makes the other person, again, look at you through a way different lens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's, what you say about needing someone versus choosing someone. And it's such an important piece, because I think too often, and that's probably, I think, how I was when I was a 20-year-old guy looking for a wife, that I need someone to complete me. Yes, it wasn't that Jerry Maguire moment. And versus you're feeling complete with Christ, and that you just, you need that person to, to complement you on this journey. But so kind of to that point, like, where do you think a lot of relationships break down today? What are some of the sort of the I guess potholes that people run into on this journey?
Gosh.
I
Well,
would say
go ahead.
one of the main ones I would say is like being intentional
Hmm.
and with your intimacy. And intimacy isn't just sexual, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
physical, spiritual, emotional, but just not being intentional, because when you're dating, you put a lot of thought into a lot of things like,
Mm.
what are we going to do? What am I going to wear? Should I leave a little note? Should I stop and get a flower? There's intention. And then you throw in like a couple of kids and a stressful job and a few areas of disappointment and busyness, and you just get out of being intentional. And that's where you slowly slip into just coexisting.
Yeah.
And then that's when people, I think, when they say they grew apart or they fell out of love, I think they just stopped being intentional. They stopped putting any sort of effort and care into the relationship because life happened, and disappointment and all this stuff is sprinkled in, and so it's like they just stopped pursuing that intimacy and knowing each other and talking and spending time together. Like, you did that at the beginning. You were very intentional,
Yeah.
So I think that that's a major pothole, that life can get in the way and we just slowly drift into
Yeah. The drift.
the drift.
Beware of the drift. It's
Mhm.
usually not like a sharp left. It may feel like that. It may hit you on a Tuesday where somebody gets left hooked. They didn't see it coming, but it was really a drift, and it had been happening for years.
Mhm.
And it just is, now their eyes are open to. Maybe they didn't want to believe it was happening. They wouldn't want to believe that their spouse was capable of X, Y, or Z. And when they come to them, but really that had been drifting
Mhm.
for years. And two people play a role in that. They
Mhm.
really do. And it's not the fault. It's not to say the fault of, like, if one makes a catastrophic error, say adultery or that on that level, and people kind of think there's no way back for that. And I'm like, oh yeah, there is redemption from that. Like, it's amazing what God can do when you have an awakening, and the healing you can actually be better on the other side from these things. And I want couples, like, we want couples to know that, like, you can dream again, you can hope again, you can believe again, you can start dating again. And that's where, like, some of people need to start. Like, they need to start, like, dating each other again, really dating, because we're just so you know, we're the marriage people who are kind of the anti-date night, though. Because I don't know about you, Neil, but like when we were first together, we didn't have to set up date night. Like, we want to be with each other all the time. But then somewhere in the life gets in the way, and we're like, where can we carve out 30 minutes to spend together? And it's like,
Yeah.
what happened? What happened with our, like, something in our heart that felt it? We don't mean to be like cheesy or like, but it's like I talked to the guy last night, like I'm not dependent, like, I don't need her, but I choose her and I love to spend time. We love cultivating our intimacy and our closeness. We love it.
Mhm.
We still can go hang out with friends. We can still be like apart.
We still go on dates.
Yeah, it's not, and I don't call it like, oh, what are you doing at home? Like, we're not weirdos, but it's like, we desire to have closeness. And couples, I think one of the potholes is they don't develop closeness. They think because we've been together for 15 years, like the cliche, like, right, I love you, and if something changes, I'll let you know. And it's like, I think the pothole for men is what she's talking about. I can speak to men. It's like, what happened with your pursuit? Like, I want to challenge men as they, like, keep pursuing your wife. Like, that is a God ordained, I believe, a God ordained order that men are pursuers. like this is Christ, and like, Christ is picture of the church. Like, here's Christ pursuing. That's what he does. He's going after. And like, as men, he's called us to love our wives. That's what it says. And so like go back to the scriptures as men and challenge ourselves to like, how am I pursuing my wife in healthy ways? Not just for physical intimacy, but how am I pursuing her heart?
Mhm.
You know, and that's where I think if you do that, you'll get, not that you're manipulative, but if you do that and pursue the heart,
Mhm.
wow, you'll get an explosive, intimate marriage.
Mhm. And doing like cultivating that closeness is a lot of little things. Like it doesn't have to be this big complicated scenario. It's like, they're just the little reaches throughout the day that just, like show the person I'm here,
Yeah.
I care,
Yeah.
the quick text message, I'm thinking of you, it's just all the little things over time that cultivate that closeness.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to be brutally honest here about something that probably going to, have my man card revoked if that's such a thing. But I mean, because like I love spending time with Amy, right? And wasn't like that at all before. I wanted to spend as little time with her as possible. But when I got my heart right with God and got a new heart, I want to spend every second with her. But I think you're right. It doesn't take a lot. Like, this is where my man card comes in. Like, we don't do a whole heck of a lot, but just sitting on the couch and like she comes home, or if I come home from work and I'll sit down next to her, she'll immediately throw her feet up in my lap and say, okay, rub my feet. And like, but I want to do that. Like, I want to serve her,
Yeah.
and just be with her and be in her presence. Right. And it's
Yeah.
just a different, this is a
Yeah.
different perspective. But I do want to sort of address this one thing, especially for men that might be out there. And you talk about, this intimacy, and it's more than just a physical intimacy that that we need to pursue our wives in. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, how much does, the use of pornography and that type of thing sort of, I guess, poison that dynamic, if you will?
Yeah, I think that is I mean, it's an ever growing, it's an ever growing challenge in our culture and our society. Like, we're seeing the numbers, we're seeing the brokenness, and the pain surrounding it. And we're also seeing, though, I believe there's education coming behind this that's backing like what is the different nuances in the brain that porn does. I was just talking to a gentleman today about this, and we were just talking about how destructive pornography is, and how prevalent it is, and how it just seeps in the access to it, right? And what it does, they've taken scans of brains, and I don't want to talk beyond what I'm really knowledgeable in, but what I've been in some seminars and seen, the scans of brains of heroin addicts and porn addicts, same. Yeah. The destruction of the brain, the holes in the brain, the cognitive development or stunting, and the memory loss and things that happen as a result of continued porn use, it's real. And so that's from a brain standpoint. So now we understand deeper what we're dealing with. Like, from a man who's dealing with this, it's not just like this so simple as to tell him, well, stop watching porn. Like, or you don't love your wife because you're watching porn, or you're looking at porn. This is a addiction. This is a deep level brain, and it has to come from a spiritual, an emotional or mental, and a physical side. You have to get all three components, because there is a discipline to it. I believe there is a discipline. There's a spiritual awakening to it, right? And then there is there is a thing that needs to be healed in the brain. And so it's not so easy. Hey, just stop watching porn. Believe me, I wanted to stop watching porn. I deeply desire. I mean, I want to give this up, but my brain was it was such a wrestling match. So the shame engine, boy, the shame and the cycle was real. Now, for her, I don't want to speak for you, but she has a powerful story of what it means to, like, be in a support, to not fully understand, but not lay shame, and to be able to walk alongside and pray and just war and believe for healing.
Well, and like I
Sorry,
had to, no, I want women to know that 99% of the time, if your husband is dealing with porn, it really has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do that he doesn't find you attractive, he doesn't love you, he doesn't desire you. Like Curt said, it's something that probably entered his life before you came along and snatched his brain away. Like,
Yeah.
and so I had to separate that it has nothing to do with me as a woman and as a wife. Like I do miss the mark, but it's not like, oh, if I could just do this better, or if I could just do this more, or if I could just look a certain way, or I could like, and laying all of that on me to like fix him. Like, it is not my job to fix him. It is my job to, like I said earlier, try to pray for him, be the biggest support, be someone he can come to without laying shame, and all of those things to help him in that recovery of that addiction. But to know as a woman, and again, this is where it goes back to, I am a whole person. So my identity is not wrapped up in him alone, right? So when he misses the mark or missed the mark, I didn't have to take that as on myself, right? Because I'm good. Me and the Lord are good. And so now I'm a strong person and can help him through this, instead of me taking that on as part of my identity. And now there's something wrong with me. And now I have shame and he has shame. And now we're both snowballing in this whole cycle. So for women, I mean, it is most certainly, I would say 99% of the time, it has really nothing to do with his love for you, or how he desires you or anything like that. And that really set me free, knowing that, to be able to stand next to him and help him through that.
The sad reality is, you and I know, Neil, that it does affect our ability to have closeness and intimacy.
Yep.
When porn is allowed, to just be operated in full capacity in that kind of level, it's going to lead to other things. It's going to lead to, whether it's real relationships. I mean, that is a very strong possibility down that track. But for a lot of men, it may not lead there, but it leads to a breaking of the relationship that you desire the most. You can't have full intimacy with that in operation. You're going to be sacrificing something, and that then works into your other relationships. You can become frustrated in life. You can become in a fog in life. You can become depressed. All these things begin to operate. And so porn is as destructive as, I believe, as any drug that we have out there. It's as destructive, or maybe more, because culture tends to accept, culture accepts it, and or minimizes it, or flat out just accepts it as a valid way to make money, right? As a valid, all these things. We know this, but we don't. Like, we as Christ followers, as centering our life around God and the Word of God, we want to apprehend it for the vehicle that brings death and destruction. But there's life outside of, there's life and there's healing. I really believe that God has created a pathway to healing the brain, and healing the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said, Brooke, is important for women to remember, that it's not about them necessarily. It's something that was triggered a long time ago, usually in childhood. And it's just something that it's a struggle for everybody. And that's one of the things that surprised me the most since I've been going to church, is how many men inside the church are struggling with it. That's heartbreaking, because I know what it is. I know what it's doing to men. So
yes. Well, you said that right there, Neil. That's the thing for men to know, that your porn addiction is, on the surface level, it may be seen as, oh, it's just about porn, but it's probably not.
No.
It's probably not. And that's the enemy's deception in our life, is that there's a deeper rooted issue that we need touched and we need healed from, that led us into that, like to get that hook in, right? And so you're right, it could have started in the vulnerability of our childhood, right? It could have started there, where a lie was implanted in us that we're not enough, right? That we're a spirit of rejection comes over us. And these are the things that I walked in. And so porn was the manifestation of that, of deeper level pain. But I just thought, I was like, I gotta stop from porn, right? But God's like, I gotta get, he's like, I want to get to the root of that.
Yeah.
And here I am 44. And that's like, still like, I want to tell men, like, listen, if you're deeply set and rooted in porn addiction, this is not something that just like snap of the finger and you're better. Now, what I do believe is there's levels of healing that God is bringing to your life. Now, I believe this, God can instantly heal, but I also know that God just brings you through from glory to glory and begins to bring healing and healing and healing to your life. If you allow him to, keep doing layers. And I'm speaking to different levels of men, because like one guy I talked to, he's like, well, I started looking at porn at 13 and he was able to stop. Well, I saw porn when I was at 7 years old. I have no box for that at 7. No box. Sexual abuse from 10 to 15. No box for that. Right. So that went deep. And because I layered it and wouldn't get to it because I was scared, I was ashamed, boy, it built up. So now God's got to peel it back. So I want to encourage men of like, let him peel it back. It may take a journey. It may, but it's worth it. It's like worth every step to get your healing. And don't allow it like you get stuck and then shame to then pile back. No. Just let him keep pulling it back.
And I think one of the things for us was allowing him to talk about it with me, not in a detailed way, but to say, hey, I'm struggling. Hey, I, need you to pray, and I need you to understand that, and he reassured me and things like that. So having a relationship that is open and without condemnation and shame is, I think, a valuable point to healing.
It's good.
It is. And I think too, when you get rid of that, when you take that out of your life, it changes, it changes your marriage, right? It changes the way that you look at your partner. And so it's so crazy what it does to your brain and how it just scrambles you. But I don't want to end on that note. I want to end on a positive note.
Yeah, sure.
So one last question for both of you before we go. Like, what has you optimistic about marriages today?
Yeah. Okay. I think optimistic about marriages. I think what we bring in like a special way, if I can say it like this, you can chime in. I know where I'm going here. Culture is unashamed about talking about sexuality in ways. They'll bring it up to our children, and they're doing this in schools. They're doing this all over. They're putting social media, right? They're unashamed. And the enemy is, he's crafty about that, about, creating fogginess and not bringing clarity. And so we have all this around. When we deal with couples, there's a lot of questions around intimacy, around this. And we're becoming more and more, we want to be unashamed. We want to be open. And I think there's more Christian, biblically based people that want to create these spaces to actually talk. Because the world will answer your questions. This is part of like what I joke with our pastor Philip about, like, everything I learned about sex, I learned from porn. That's not good.
No.
But that's
not real.
That is a fact. That is a fact. Like this, right? Because it's unashamed. It'll show you. It'll tell you. This is intimacy. This is like real set, right? And it's you and I both know, Neil, it's not. It's actually God's intimacy and plan for marriage. He's got the corner market on sexuality. And here we are in the kingdom, like timid to like talk to couples, to sit with them and really talk about their frustrations, their questions. I don't have anybody to talk to. And where would they go for resources? Well, Google it. What are you going to get when you Google it? Probably not godly stuff.
And like when we did our like marriage retreat and seminar things, and we would have people post questions. I mean, there's people that have been married 30 years and they have questions, but they've never had a safe place to know who to ask, or it's uncomfortable to talk about. And so, but what's being thrown in your face is not truth.
Yeah.
So people are very confused. And so I think we're passionate about having open dialogue, and it might be uncomfortable, but like couples need some place where they can ask the questions and talk about it without feeling ashamed, or that they should already know the answers, you know. And I think that that's important to give people, is to give them a space to have that open dialogue. I think another thing for us is, you know, when we were in the middle of all of our junk, and someone would say to us, you know, don't worry, you know, if they would have said, it's going to be better in 10 years than you ever thought, we would have been like, how? You're crazy. Like, it's dark, it's messy, it feels terrible. It can't get any better. Like, it's just not gonna. Right. And so it's like, but us being on the other side, you being on the other side, like, you can see it. And so it's like, we want to stand in the gap for those couples and be hope when they don't have hope.
Yeah.
Because we know it can be, we know it to be true. So I get that when they're in the middle of it, it seems hopeless. It seems dark, and they need someone to come along. They don't need their girlfriend or their guy friend or their coworker to be like, oh yeah, this is terrible, throw in the towel. They need someone to come in and say, it can be better. There's hope for you. Yep. This is why. Yep. This is our story of redemption and moving through it. Yep. And getting to the better side, that it was even better than it was before. Yep. And so we're passionate about being that hope for couples when they don't have hope for themselves.
Yep. I believe too, God is bringing others around, even us. You guys are a great example. God is bringing others and telling the same story. So I'm optimistic that out of the hurt and pain, God is bringing forth couples that they have the same redemption story, because we need more couples to tell their story. Because we you know, we talking to other our spiritual leaders and stuff about this too. We need more. Like, it's not like we're going to meet every couple. Like, that's not going to happen. But God's going to bring people into our life that we are optimistic that, hey, we can journey with you, and we believe for. Like, if you're not believing, let us stand in the gap and believe for you, because we've been there.
And don't be ashamed of your story, because your story brings hope to other people.
Yeah.
Well, and it's, you know, and it's just amazing how God works. So we actually, someone had reached out to The Rock, who happened to saw Amy and I's testimony randomly. This person doesn't go to The Rock. They saw our testimony and emailed The Rock, and the wife didn't say, hey, can you have Amy contact me? Because I think she can help. Like, it's just like, that's so crazy. Like, but that's why we are open and honest. And I appreciate you leading by example and the stuff that you do. And that brings everybody encouragement. So thank you for that. Yeah. If people want to contact you and reach out to you, what's the best way where can they find you? How about that?
They find us, you know, Curt at rockofkc.com. They can email me through that. They can email her at brookvig
at gmail.com.
Yeah. And awesome. She does a lot of life coaching online, Instagram, and helps women navigate that side specifically. I know she meets with men and women, but specifically really helps women navigate a lot of different things, but the struggles and the trials that come with being married to us.
Yeah, right. It's tough.
We are difficult creatures sometimes, you know.
I think women get the bad rap, but I'm telling you, sometimes
I don't know. Our experience is men. Like our experience has been it's the men.
It's the men. I didn't realize it until I, until I found God, but I realized, we've screwed it up pretty good for everybody.
We blame it on the women, like Adam. Nothing's changed.
Right. Well, hey, listen, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. And you guys are a blessing. So thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks again to Curt and Brook for coming on Unmasked this week. I truly appreciate them sharing their story, sharing their journey. And I'm just so blessed. Amy and I are both blessed for what they've done for our marriage. It's been awesome. And so thank you again to Curt and Brook for taking some time to be with us. So, hey, next week, yes, we're coming back with video number 2. Episode 53 is going to feature Christy Neal. Christy is an author of Don't Ever Tell. She was on the podcast last year. We're bringing her back to wrap up the month of February and talking about how to build trust after adultery. Very interesting conversation with Christy. She's awesome, an incredible servant of God. So I'm looking forward to connecting with her again and bringing that interview to you next week. Hey, listen, just thank you so much for being here this week. Please check out neilgetzlow.com. And then if you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel. I don't know what I'm doing. This is my first week on YouTube, so hopefully we did all right. But I appreciate any comments you've got. Feel free to leave them below. And hey, listen, just remember, Jesus did not come to hang out with the saints and the righteous. He came out to hang with the sick and the sinners of the world, just like you and just like me, not to revel in our sin, but to call us out of it. Have a good week, everybody.